In a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle, two couples thought they were just playing a daring game. Emma and Ryan had been married 8 years, best friends with Megan and Josh since college. It was supposed to be harmless, a one-night swap, no rules, no guilt. But the next morning, Emma woke up to a message on her phone that changed everything. Josh wasn't ready to switch back. He said he'd fallen in love with her. From that moment, their friendship, their marriages, and their sanity started to unravel, and by the end of the week, one of them would be dead. Emma always thought her marriage was solid, quiet but safe. She liked predictability, lists and routines that made her feel in control. Ryan was practical, steady, and rarely emotional. To most people they looked perfect, but behind that calm surface, their love had faded into polite distance. They were partners in logistics, not in life. When Megan and Josh invited them for a weekend dinner, Emma thought it might be a nice distraction. She didn't know that night would expose every secret, every weakness she had worked years to keep hidden. Megan and Josh lived just a few houses down in a modern home filled with music, laughter, and the smell of takeout. They were loud, impulsive, and full of inside jokes that made Emma feel both comforted and envious. She admired Megan's confidence and the easy chemistry between her and Josh. Ryan liked them too, though he often said they were too much. As the evening went on, the wine bottles emptied faster than usual, and the conversation grew looser. The talk turned to marriage, honesty, and what it means to really know someone. Megan joked that they should all switch lives for a night, just to see how the other half lives. Everyone laughed, but the idea stuck in the air like static. Ryan rolled his eyes but didn't shut it down. Josh leaned in, half joking, half serious, asking what would happen if they actually did it. Emma laughed along, even though her stomach turned. She could feel something shifting, something reckless breaking through the boredom. She told herself it was all in fun, but deep down, a small dangerous part of her wanted to know what would happen. Later that night, as rain tapped softly against the windows, the game stopped being a joke. The rules were simple. One night, no consequences, and no questions after. It was meant to be harmless, a private experiment in trust. But the moment Emma saw Josh's expression, the way he looked at her as if she'd been invisible until now, she knew it wasn't harmless at all. She felt seen in a way Ryan hadn't managed in years. When the night ended, everyone went home pretending it never happened. But Emma couldn't pretend as easily. The next morning, Emma woke up before Ryan, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in her mind. She told herself it meant nothing, that she was fine, but a strange guilt sat heavy in her chest. When Ryan kissed her goodbye before work, it felt mechanical, like muscle memory. She wanted to tell him she regretted it, but she didn't. That silence was her first mistake. She poured coffee, opened her phone, and froze when she saw Josh's message. 3 words glowed on the screen. "I can't stop." Her heart felt like it skipped a beat. She deleted the message, convincing herself that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Throughout the day she kept glancing at her phone, waiting for another buzz. By afternoon she found herself thinking about his voice, his hands, his eyes. Details that should have meant nothing but somehow did. When Ryan called to say he'd be home late, she felt both relieved and ashamed. She didn't reply to Josh, but she didn't block him either. That small choice, leaving the door cracked open, was how the obsession began creeping into her life. By the weekend, Emma noticed little changes in her mood. She became restless, distracted, checking her reflection more often than usual. She told herself it was because she was bored, not because she missed attention. Ryan didn't notice. He was buried in work emails, distant but calm as always. At dinner, Megan texted, joking about the experiment. Emma replied with a short laugh emoji, pretending she was fine. But when she looked at Ryan across the table, eating in silence, she couldn't help wondering if he missed someone else too. That night, while Ryan showered, Emma scrolled through her messages again. No new texts from Josh. The empty inbox made her stomach twist. When Ryan came out, she locked her phone and smiled like nothing was wrong. They watched a show together, but she couldn't focus on a single line. Her mind was elsewhere at that lake cabin in that moment that had changed everything. She wondered if Josh had forgotten or if he was testing her patience. Either way, she was already losing the game they promised would have no consequences. Sunday morning brought a knock at the door. Megan stood there with coffee and her usual grin, though something felt off. Her energy was different, almost forced. She talked about random things, work, errands, neighbors, but her eyes avoided Emma's. Emma wondered if she knew about Josh's message. When Ryan joined them, Megan suddenly became cheerful again, almost too cheerful. As soon as she left, Emma realized her friend was hiding something. She felt a wave of guilt mixed with curiosity. For the first time, she wondered who the real fool in all this was. Later that night, Emma sat outside on the porch, watching the streetlights flicker. She thought about deleting Josh's number but couldn't bring herself to do it. The quiet suburban street felt too peaceful, too ordinary for the chaos spinning in her head. She scrolled through old photos of the four of them laughing together, vacations, parties, birthdays. Every picture now felt like a lie. Then her phone buzzed again. Another message from Josh. "You felt it too." She closed her eyes, wishing she could ignore it, but her hand didn't move. The next day at work, Emma tried to focus on her clients but couldn't. Every time her phone vibrated, her pulse jumped. At lunch, she checked her messages and saw Josh had sent a picture, a view from their favorite diner. The caption read, "Miss this." She locked the screen, pretending it didn't matter. Her coworker asked if she was okay. She smiled, said she was just tired. Inside, she felt like something was unraveling. That night, she didn't tell Ryan about the messages. Keeping secrets had already started to feel normal. When Ryan came home late again, Emma noticed he didn't kiss her goodnight. She wanted to ask if everything was okay, but pride held her back. She sat in bed, staring at the empty space beside her, realizing how long it had been since they'd really touched. The more distance she felt from her husband, the more her mind went back to Josh. She hated herself for it. Before turning off the lamp, she whispered into the dark that she would stop. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true anymore. The following evening, Megan texted her again. This time, it wasn't a joke. She asked if Emma had noticed Josh acting strange. Emma lied, saying no, even though she knew exactly what Megan meant. The guilt sat heavy in her chest, but curiosity won again. She wanted to know more, to see how far this web had spread. She started thinking about whether Ryan had secrets too. Everyone seemed to be pretending, wearing masks just to survive the illusion of happy lives. The difference was, Emma's mask was already starting to crack. That night, while folding laundry, Emma heard a thump at the front door. When she opened it, no one was there. Only a single envelope on the mat. Inside was a bus ticket. One way to the lake town where their experiment happened. On the back was a single note. "Meet me where it started." Her hands trembled, though she didn't know if it was fear or temptation. She stared at the ticket for a long time, then tucked it into her drawer. She told herself she wouldn't go, but the thought wouldn't leave her mind. By morning, Emma had already made up her mind. She told Ryan she was showing a property out of town and packed her bag. The drive to the lake felt longer than before, the silence pressing against her thoughts. When she arrived, the cabin looked the same. Quiet, empty, peaceful. Josh was waiting outside, holding 2 cups of coffee, smiling like he'd been there all along. For a moment, she forgot how dangerous this was. She stepped closer, telling herself it was just to end things. Deep down, she already knew that was a lie. Josh's voice was calm, almost too calm. As he handed Emma the coffee, he said he'd been waiting for her, as if she had promised to come. She told him it had to stop, that they had made a mistake, but he smiled and said some mistakes were meant to happen. His tone made her uneasy. He talked about how alive he felt with her, how Ryan didn't deserve her. She turned to leave, but he stopped her with a single sentence. He said Ryan had secrets she didn't know about. The mention of secrets rattled her. On the drive back home, her thoughts spun like a loop she couldn't escape. What if Josh was lying? What if he wasn't? Ryan had been distant for months, maybe even before the game. She told herself not to overthink, but that word, secrets, burned through her calm like fire. She wanted to tell Ryan about the meeting but couldn't. It would mean confessing everything. So she said nothing, though silence was starting to sound louder than words ever could. That night Ryan barely spoke during dinner. He checked his phone often, muttered about work, and avoided her eyes. When he went to bed early, Emma sat at the table, staring at the empty plates. She wondered if this was how marriages died. Not through fights but through silence that stretched too long. The thought of Josh's warning came back again, whispering at the back of her mind. She didn't believe him, but part of her wanted to. Believing him would mean her guilt wasn't the only one. The next day, Emma woke to a message from Josh. It said, "He's lying to you." No context, no proof, just that. She ignored it, deleted it, and tried to lose herself in work. But when she passed Ryan's office later that day, he was on the phone, speaking quietly. When he noticed her, he hung up quickly. That single action cracked her trust further. She tried to convince herself he was talking about business. Still, the silence between them now carried something heavier. Suspicion. That evening Megan stopped by to return a borrowed book. Her face looked pale, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept. She chatted nervously about small things, avoiding anything serious. Emma studied her carefully, realizing Megan was hiding something too. The moment Megan left, Emma searched her social media out of impulse. Every photo looked perfectly normal, too normal. That same hour, Josh texted again, saying Megan knew everything. Emma threw her phone aside but kept glancing at it, unable to stop herself from wondering what everything meant. That night, Ryan didn't come home. He texted that he was staying late for a project deadline. Emma didn't believe him. She sat on the couch, the TV flickering in the background, her thoughts louder than the sound. At midnight, she checked his location on her phone. It was turned off. She almost called Josh, but she stopped herself. That moment scared her more than anything, realizing she was starting to trust the wrong person. The line between fear and need was blurring, and she didn't know which side she stood on anymore. When Ryan finally came home at dawn, he looked drained. His clothes smelled like perfume that wasn't hers. He said it was from a co-worker's party, but the explanation sounded weak. Emma nodded and said nothing. She wanted to scream, demand the truth, but her pride chained her tongue. Instead, she went to work and threw herself into cleaning, organizing, pretending everything was fine. That night, another message came from Josh, a photo of Ryan's car parked outside Megan's office building. The timestamp was from the night before. The image felt like proof and poison at once. Emma zoomed in, memorizing every detail, convincing herself it could be fake but secretly believing it wasn't. She didn't reply. Instead, she scrolled through her gallery and found an old photo of the four of them at a barbecue, all smiling like nothing could break them. She stared at Ryan's arm around Megan's shoulder. How had she never noticed how close they looked? Her stomach twisted. For the first time she wanted to hurt him back. Not with anger but with truth. She drove to Megan's office the next afternoon. The parking lot was half empty, sunlight glinting off the car roofs. She waited for half an hour before seeing Ryan's car pull in. He didn't notice her. She watched him walk inside with a paper bag, maybe lunch, maybe guilt. When he came out, he was alone. She drove home before he saw her. Her hands were tight around the steering wheel. It wasn't the cheating that broke her. It was the calmness of it. He looked too comfortable in betrayal. That evening, Ryan came home cheerful, humming softly, acting like nothing was wrong. He cooked dinner, asked about her day, and even poured her a glass of wine. She nodded, smiled, and played along. Inside, something had changed. The distance between them was no longer confusion. It was understanding. He wasn't faithful, and she wasn't innocent. Their marriage had become an unspoken truce of lies. When he kissed her goodnight, she closed her eyes and thought of Josh again, realizing how one game had poisoned every part of her life. Emma started noticing patterns, how Ryan always left on Tuesdays, how Megan always canceled plans the same nights. Her suspicion hardened into quiet certainty. Josh kept sending messages, some photos, some cryptic words like "told you" or "you deserve better." She didn't respond. But she didn't block him either. Every text felt like both validation and control. She told herself she wasn't weak, just curious. But every time his name appeared on her phone, she felt the pull, not of love, but of someone who finally understood her loneliness. Late one evening, while watering the plants outside, she found a single red thread tied to her mailbox. It wasn't there before. It looked deliberate, almost like a signature. She touched it, her stomach twisting. She didn't need to ask who left it. Josh had found another way to remind her that he was watching. She cut it off and threw it in the trash. But that night she kept picturing that thread, its color bright against the dark metal like a promise that wouldn't fade. Ryan noticed her tension and asked if everything was okay. She wanted to tell him everything. The thread, the text, the photo, but her voice wouldn't cooperate. Instead, she nodded, smiled faintly, and said she was fine. When he kissed her forehead, it felt hollow. She went to bed early, lying awake beside him, realizing they were strangers now, sharing a house built on secrets. Before closing her eyes, she checked her phone again. Another message waited. "You shouldn't have cut it off." She deleted it but couldn't fall asleep afterward. The next morning, Emma woke up to find the red thread tied again, this time around her car mirror. Her hands trembled as she untied it, scanning the street for anyone watching. There was no one, just neighbors going about their day. She didn't tell Ryan. Instead, she drove to work, pretending nothing happened. But all day, she felt eyes on her. That night when she parked in the driveway, she found something else. Her wedding photo folded neatly on the seat. Half of it had been cut away. Emma showed the picture to Ryan, who looked more angry than afraid. He insisted it was some sick prank. She wanted to believe him but couldn't. They argued briefly before falling into silence again. That night, the alarm went off around midnight. The back door was open, but nothing was taken. Only one thing had changed. The trash bin was tipped over and the red thread was gone. Emma called the police, but by the time they arrived, everything looked normal. The officer said it was probably kids. She knew better. After that, Ryan suggested installing cameras around the house. Emma agreed but didn't mention the other strange details. The bus ticket, the messages, the photos. She didn't want to seem paranoid, but the next day she noticed her phone battery draining fast even when unused. Someone was tracking her, she thought. Or maybe she was losing her mind. Either way, the walls of her safe suburban home no longer felt safe. Every shadow in the backyard looked like a figure waiting for her to open the door. Josh texted again that night. This time it wasn't about love. It was about control. "You shouldn't have told him anything," he wrote. She didn't respond, though her fingers hovered over the keyboard. He sent another message. A picture of her house taken from across the street. Her breath caught. She turned off her phone and unplugged it. Ryan came in, asked if everything was okay. She said yes. He looked at her for a moment, maybe sensing the truth, maybe just tired. Then he walked away, leaving her alone with fear. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. Emma avoided her friends, ignored calls, and focused on work. Ryan acted normal, though the tension between them thickened. One afternoon, Megan called, her voice shaky. She said Josh had been acting strange, controlling, unpredictable. Emma wanted to tell her everything, but she didn't. Instead, she offered calm advice, like someone reading from a script. When the call ended, Emma stared at her reflection in the dark office window. She didn't know which one of them Josh was really obsessed with anymore. That night, while Ryan slept, Emma scrolled through Josh's old photos online. There were pictures of the lake, of dinners, of group vacations, memories that once meant safety. But as she scrolled, she noticed something disturbing. In the corner of one photo from months ago, before the swap, Josh's eyes were fixed on her. She hadn't noticed it before. It wasn't lust, exactly. It was possession. She slammed the phone down and closed her eyes. Somewhere deep down she realized the truth. This had started long before that night. Emma started seeing Josh's car around town. Once outside the grocery store, once near her gym, and once parked across from her office. Every time he was gone before she could confront him. When she told Ryan about it, he dismissed it, saying she was imagining things. That made her angrier than comforted. She started carrying pepper spray in her purse and checking her rearview mirror obsessively. The feeling of being watched had become part of her daily routine. Every sound felt like a signal only she could hear. Then came the night. Ryan didn't come home again. No message, no call. Emma stayed up pacing, the phone in her hand, debating who to contact. Against all logic, she texted Josh, asking if he knew where Ryan was. His reply came instantly. He's with her. She didn't know what that meant, but it was enough to send her driving. She didn't even know where she was going. She just needed to move, to breathe. When she stopped the car hours later, she realized she'd driven back to the lake. The cabin looked deserted, dark against the silver reflection of the water. Emma stepped out, her shoes crunching on wet gravel. The smell of rain hung heavy in the air. She walked toward the porch and froze when she saw something glinting by the door. A glass jar filled with coffee beans, Josh's favorite. She knew it was a message. She picked it up and turned it in her hands, seeing her name scratched faintly into the lid. She wanted to throw it into the lake but couldn't. She took it home instead. When she walked in, Ryan was waiting in the kitchen. He asked where she'd been. His tone wasn't angry. It was scared. She lied, saying she needed space. He looked exhausted, guilt sitting behind his eyes. She almost confessed everything then, but fear stopped her. Instead, she poured herself a drink and stared at the jar. She realized they were both keeping secrets, both pretending to hold things together. Marriage, she thought, wasn't built on love anymore. It was built on silence, each lie balancing the other. That night, she woke to the sound of her phone vibrating. A message from an unknown number appeared. "You took what was mine." No name, no explanation. She deleted it and turned off the phone, but the words burned into her mind. When she checked the backyard from the window, the motion light flicked on. For a moment, she thought she saw movement. Someone near the fence. She didn't wake Ryan. She just stood there staring into the dark, realizing that fear had replaced sleep completely in her life now. The next morning, Emma found Ryan sitting on the porch with his head in his hands. He said Megan had gone missing. Her car was still in the driveway, phone left inside. Police were looking for her, but Josh had vanished too. Emma felt the world tilt beneath her. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Deep down, she already knew this was connected to them, to that one night that should have stayed a joke. The game had turned into something darker, and she wasn't sure who would survive it. Police questioned everyone, asking when they last saw Megan. Emma lied, saying it had been over a week. She didn't mention the texts or the jar or the threats. Ryan said as little as possible, avoiding her eyes. When the officers left, the silence felt heavier than before. Emma stood in the living room, staring at the spot where Megan had once stood, laughing about recipes and wine. That memory now felt distant, unreal. She wondered if Megan was alive somewhere, or if Josh had made sure she wouldn't be found. Ryan spent the rest of the evening pacing the kitchen, saying it would all blow over. but he didn't sound confident. Emma could tell he was hiding something, maybe fear, maybe guilt. She wanted to ask if he had seen Megan that night, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she cleaned the already spotless counters, the act giving her something to control. When Ryan went upstairs, she stayed up, staring out the window. The reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, someone she didn't recognize anymore. The next morning, Ryan left early for work. Emma watched from the window as his car pulled away, then sat down and opened her phone. There were new messages from Josh, dozens of them. Some were simple words. "We're meant to be." Others were darker. "He deserves this." She deleted each one, but one photo stopped her. It was of Megan, smiling in what looked like the lake cabin. The timestamp was 2 nights ago. Her pulse raced as she wondered if it was old or new. Either answer terrified her. She drove to the police station that afternoon, ready to tell them everything. But when she got there, she saw Ryan's car parked out front. Through the window, she spotted him talking to one of the detectives. His gestures looked calm, controlled. She froze. If he was already there, what was he saying? Did he suspect her of something? Fear twisted into confusion. She left before anyone saw her, driving aimlessly through town, trying to convince herself that she was still in control of her own story. At home, the air felt thick with tension. Ryan acted normal, asking about dinner and making small talk, but his tone was wrong. Too casual. Too even. When she asked about the police, he said they just wanted his statement. Emma pretended to believe him, but she saw something flicker in his eyes, a flash of worry. She began to wonder if he was scared of Josh or scared of her. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing she no longer trusted anyone, not even herself. 2 days later, Megan's car was found near the lake. Her phone was on the passenger seat. Her purse still inside. There was no sign of her. The town buzzed with rumors, an affair gone wrong, a jealous husband, a lover's pact. Emma listened to it all quietly, feeling her stomach turn. When the news reached her home, Ryan poured himself a drink without saying a word. The glass shook slightly in his hand. Emma asked if he was okay. He said yes, but she could tell the answer wasn't meant for her. That night, Emma dreamed of the lake, dark water rippling under moonlight, the sound of a bell somewhere in the distance. She woke up sweating, unsure if it was a dream or memory. The smell of rain lingered through the open window. Downstairs, she heard a faint creak. When she checked, the back door was slightly open again. Nothing was missing. Only the jar of coffee beans she had taken from the cabin was gone. It left a ring of dust on the table where it used to sit. The next morning, she asked Ryan if he had touched the jar. He looked confused, said no, and asked what she was talking about. She let it go but couldn't shake the feeling that someone had entered the house. She checked the cameras, but one of them had stopped recording during the night. Ryan said it was probably a technical glitch. Emma didn't argue, but her mind was already racing. She called the security company. They said the footage couldn't be recovered. That missing hour felt like a hole she could fall through. Later that week, Emma found a letter in the mailbox. No stamp, no handwriting, just her name printed neatly. Inside was a photograph of her sleeping. Her hair spread across the pillow. The angle was from inside the house. She sat frozen, trying to process it. When Ryan came home, she showed him, but he accused her of exaggerating, saying she was letting paranoia win. That accusation hurt more than the photo itself. For the first time, Emma realized she was completely alone in this, and whoever was behind it knew that. That evening, Emma packed a small bag and drove to a motel outside town. She needed distance, clarity. The room was plain, quiet, with flickering lights and thin curtains. She locked the door twice and sat on the bed, scrolling through her phone. Dozens of missed calls from Ryan, a few from the police, and one new message from Josh. "I told you it was never about them." Her hands went cold. She threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall, screen cracking. but the message still glowed faintly. The next morning she returned home. Ryan was waiting on the porch, his face drawn, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. He asked where she had been. She lied again, saying she needed air. He didn't argue, just nodded and went inside. On the kitchen table sat the jar of coffee beans. It was back, perfectly centered. She touched the lid and found something new scratched into the metal. The words, "You belong to me." She dropped it immediately, her skin crawling. Ryan didn't see it. She swept it into a drawer. That night, Emma tried to sleep but couldn't. Every sound made her tense. Around 2 in the morning, her phone buzzed again. A message from Josh. "He'll pay soon." She stared at it for a long time before replying with one word. "Stop." Seconds later, 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply came after that. She deleted the thread and sat on the floor beside the bed, hugging her knees. She knew she should go to the police, but fear of being blamed kept her frozen in place. The next day, 2 detectives came to the house again. They said they were following up. Ryan handled most of the talking, giving polite answers, offering coffee. Emma watched from the stairs, her pulse thudding quietly. When they asked about Josh, Ryan said he hadn't heard from him in weeks. Emma noticed one of the detectives glancing at her hands, the faint red mark still visible from the thread she'd once tied around her wrist. She folded her arms to hide it, wondering if they already suspected her of something. When the detectives left, Ryan exploded in frustration. He said their lives were being destroyed because of one stupid joke. He blamed Josh, blamed the gossip, blamed everyone except himself. Emma listened quietly, letting him vent until he was out of breath. Then she asked him a simple question. If he had ever loved Megan. He didn't answer. That silence was all the confirmation she needed. She turned and walked upstairs, closing the bedroom door behind her. She didn't cry this time. There was no emotion left to spend. That night, thunder rolled across the sky and rain poured endlessly. Emma sat by the window, watching it hit the glass in rhythmic taps. She thought about how everything had started. Laughter, wine, a stupid challenge that no one took seriously. Now Megan was gone. Josh was unhinged, and Ryan was a stranger. The sound of the storm reminded her of the lake that night, the air heavy with excitement and something darker. She realized she wasn't the same person anymore. Something inside her had broken, quietly and completely. Days passed, but nothing changed. Police kept searching for Megan and Josh, but no new evidence appeared. Emma moved through the house like a ghost, cleaning rooms no one used, cooking meals no one ate. Ryan avoided her now, leaving early, coming home late. They spoke in short, polite sentences. One evening she found him sitting in the garage, staring at a photo of the 4 of them. His eyes were red. When he noticed her, he quickly hid the picture. She wanted to ask what he saw in it. She didn't. One morning, Emma went to make coffee and froze. The jar was missing again. She opened the drawer, empty. She searched the counters, the pantry, everywhere. Gone. When she turned, something on the table caught her eye. A single coffee bean split in half. She picked it up, turning it in her fingers. Inside was a folded scrap of paper, impossibly small. She unfolded it carefully. The note read, "Meet me tonight." The truth. No name, no address. Just the lake's coordinates printed in red ink. Her stomach dropped. She told herself not to go. She even tried throwing the paper away. But curiosity, or maybe guilt, dragged her back. That night, she drove out toward the lake again. The road was empty, the trees bending under wind. The cabin lights were on. She parked a distance away and approached quietly. Through the window, she saw movement, a figure pacing. When she stepped closer, she recognized him. Josh. He looked thinner, wilder, but still the same. She should have turned back then. Instead, she reached for the door handle. The door creaked open and the smell of coffee filled the air. Josh turned slowly, a calm smile spreading across his face. He said she came back, like he'd been expecting it. She wanted to demand answers. Where Megan was, what he had done, but fear rooted her still. He said Ryan had lied to both of them, that Megan had betrayed them all. His words sounded practiced, rehearsed. She didn't believe him, but she couldn't ignore how certain he seemed. Then he lifted something from the table, Ryan's watch. Seeing the watch broke her calm. It was the same one she had gifted Ryan last Christmas. She demanded to know where he got it. Josh didn't answer. He said the truth was coming, that it was already too late for both of them. Before she could ask more, he walked to the door, motioning for her to leave. She did. The moment she stepped outside, she heard the sound of a distant bell across the lake. She turned, but no one else was there. The cabin lights flickered out behind her. Emma drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles ached. Every turn of the road felt longer, heavier. When she reached the driveway, Ryan's car was gone. She walked inside to find the house dark. Only the kitchen light was on. On the counter sat a single note written in Ryan's handwriting. "Don't trust him." She dropped it, her knees weak. The clock read 3:14 a.m. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty jar spot and waiting for morning. At sunrise, the police knocked again. They said they'd found something near the bridge outside town. Ryan's car, abandoned, keys still inside. Emma's breath caught as they said there was no sign of him yet. She answered their questions numbly, repeating that she had no idea where he went. The officers left after a while, promising updates. When she shut the door, she felt the house closing in on her. Every wall, every object, seemed to whisper reminders of the people who were now gone. She spent the next few hours walking from room to room, picking things up and setting them down again. Ryan's jacket still hung by the door, his phone charger still plugged in beside the bed. She found his watch box empty, confirming what she already knew. The one in Josh's cabin was real. She sat on the edge of the bed, numb. The sound of rain began outside, soft against the windows. For the first time, she didn't move to close them. Let the water come in, she thought. Let it all wash away. Later that day, Emma received a voicemail. It was from Josh, his tone calm, almost gentle. He said he wanted to explain everything in person. He told her to meet him again, this time at the bridge. The same bridge where Ryan's car was found. Her hands trembled as she played it again, listening for clues. There was something strange at the end of the recording. Faint static followed by what sounded like a woman's voice, distant and broken. She couldn't make out the words, but it chilled her to the core. She sat there staring at her phone, realizing she had two choices. Go to the police again and risk them blaming her, or go to Josh and find out the truth herself. She thought about everything she had lost already. Megan, Ryan, her peace, her sanity. The line between right and wrong didn't exist anymore. She took her car keys and walked toward the door, telling herself this would be the last time. Outside, the clouds gathered heavy and gray. The smell of wet asphalt filled the air, sharp and familiar. Emma drove toward the bridge as dusk settled in, her headlights cutting through the mist. The road felt emptier than usual, stretching into the horizon like a warning she couldn't turn away from. When she arrived, the bridge was quiet. Only the sound of water moving below. She parked, stepped out and waited. Her phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. Look down. She hesitated, then leaned over the railing. There in the shadows below was something metallic half buried near the waterline. Ryan's watch glinting under the pale light. Panic surged through her, but before she could move, she saw another figure standing on the opposite side of the bridge. Josh. He didn't wave or speak. He just stood there staring at her. She yelled his name, but he turned and walked into the woods. Against every instinct, she followed. Branches scratched her arms as she pushed through. the faint smell of wet soil heavy in the air. When she reached a clearing, he was gone. Only tire tracks remained, leading deeper into the forest. She felt trapped between fear and truth. She followed the tracks until they disappeared into mud. Her phone lost signal. The trees around her grew thicker, darker. Somewhere ahead she heard a faint sound, like something metallic clanging against wood. When she stepped closer, she saw a shed, old and sagging, half covered in vines. The door was slightly open. She hesitated, then pushed it wider. Inside she found boxes, tools, and in the corner, a chair with rope tied around it. The rope was frayed, stained. Her heart sank as she recognized a torn piece of Ryan's jacket. She staggered back, covering her mouth. On the table nearby sat a half-empty cup of coffee. The smell was strong and bitter. Next to it, a photo of her, asleep again. This time, the angle was from outside her bedroom window. The realization hit her hard. Josh had been inside her house more times than she'd ever known. She grabbed the photo and ran out, gasping for air, the forest pressing close around her. Somewhere behind, a twig snapped. She turned but saw nothing. The silence felt worse than any sound could. Emma ran back toward the road, branches slapping her face, mud clinging to her shoes. When she reached her car, she locked the doors and started the engine. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911, but the call didn't connect. No signal. She sped down the road, headlights flickering across the wet asphalt. Behind her, she thought she saw another pair of headlights following. She pressed harder on the gas, afraid to look again. When she finally reached town, the lights were gone. She pulled over, shaking, unsure if she was being hunted or haunted. She went straight to the police station, forcing herself to report everything: the shed, the photos, the threats. The officers listened, exchanging glances that made her stomach twist. One of them left the room to make a call. When he returned, he said they'd checked the area, but reminded her that Josh hadn't been formally accused of anything yet. Their calm tone felt unbearable. She left the station feeling smaller than before, her truth reduced to paperwork. The only comfort she had left was that at least someone else now knew. Back home, the house felt different. Too clean, too still. She noticed little things had moved. A chair angled differently, the curtain slightly open. It was subtle, but she knew it wasn't her doing. She checked the cameras again. This time the footage showed static from midnight to dawn. Her chest tightened. She unplugged them all, deciding she'd rather not know what was missing. She sat in the living room with the lights off, the faint glow of streetlights slipping through the blinds, wondering if she had already crossed into madness. Days turned into an uneasy rhythm. Police patrolled near the bridge but found nothing. Megan remained missing. Ryan was still unaccounted for. Emma started keeping her phone off most of the time. Afraid of new messages, she tried to return to work, but people whispered. She could feel their pity, their suspicion. At home she barely ate, barely slept. Every reflection in a mirror made her flinch, expecting to see someone else behind her. It was a life stripped of noise, except for one thing she couldn't escape: the sound of her own guilt. One night she sat on the porch with a cup of tea, trying to quiet her thoughts. Across the street, a car idled for a long time, engine humming. The headlights didn't move. When she stood to look, the car drove away. She went back inside, locking the door twice. Later she opened the blinds and found a single postcard taped to the glass. It was blank on one side. On the back, in neat handwriting, were 3 words: "We're not done." She dropped it immediately, her hands shaking. She didn't open the door again that night. The next morning she showed the postcard to the police. They took it, promised to look into it, but she could tell they didn't believe her. One officer suggested it might be a prank. She laughed bitterly at that. Her life had stopped feeling real weeks ago. Maybe to them she sounded like someone losing her mind. When she returned home, she noticed the jar of coffee beans was back again, sitting exactly where it had been before. She didn't touch it. She just stared, realizing she was being watched like an experiment. The following evening, rain poured non-stop. She sat in the dark, listening to the drops hit the roof in uneven rhythm. The smell of wet asphalt drifted in through a cracked window. Every sound reminded her of the lake, the water, the echo of that bell, the memory of how it all started. She thought about calling her sister, someone she hadn't spoken to in years, but what would she even say? That her best friend vanished, her husband might be dead, and she was being hunted by love turned into obsession. A knock came at the door just after midnight. Soft at first, then louder. She froze, staring toward the sound. The knock came again, followed by a voice, a man's, calm and familiar. "Emma. It's me. Ryan." Relief and confusion collided inside her. She rushed to open the door, but when she did, no one was there. Only a small envelope sat on the porch, soaked from rain. Inside was a single photo. Ryan standing by the bridge, alive, eyes open, staring at the camera. On the back one line was written, "Don't look for me." She dropped the photo. Breath-catching. If Ryan was alive, why tell her not to look? And who took the picture? She grabbed her phone, dialing the detective's number, but it went to voicemail. The house creaked, and she turned sharply toward the window. Through the rain, she thought she saw movement across the street. A shadow near the fence watching. She closed the curtains, backed away, and sat on the floor. The envelope lay beside her. Water had smeared the ink slightly, but the warning was still clear enough to read. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the clouds. For the first time in weeks the town felt calm. But the calm didn't bring peace. It brought dread. Emma sat at the kitchen table, staring at the jar of coffee beans again. She twisted the lid slowly, expecting a note inside, but it was empty. Only the smell of coffee remained, sharp and bitter. She poured the beans into the trash, and threw the jar into the sink. The glass cracked but didn't break. That felt fitting, damaged but still holding shape. Later that day she went for a drive, trying to clear her head. The air smelled of rain again, the roads glistening like mirrors. She ended up near the edge of town, where the lake road branched off. For a long moment she stared at the sign pointing toward it. She told herself she wasn't going back there, that she'd done enough damage already. But her hands betrayed her. She turned the wheel and drove down that road again. The same one where everything had started to fall apart. The lake looked peaceful, sunlight shimmering across its surface. She parked and got out, the wind carrying the faint sound of a bell somewhere far off. She walked to the dock and stood there staring at her reflection. For a moment she saw someone else, a version of herself from before, untouched by guilt or fear. But the image rippled away with the water. She realized then that she hadn't come here for closure. She'd come because she didn't know where else to exist anymore. The lake was the only place that still knew the truth. A soft splash drew her attention. She turned and saw a small wooden box floating near the shore, bumping gently against the dock. She crouched down, pulling it out. The box was sealed with tape, her name written on top. Her pulse quickened. She peeled it open, her fingers trembling. Inside were a stack of postcards, identical to the one taped to her window. The first few were blank, but the last one had writing. "Confession isn't freedom, it's surrender." Beneath it was a single key. She didn't know what it opened. Emma pocketed the key and left the lake, feeling watched even as she drove away. Back home she searched every door, every drawer, trying the key on anything that locked. Nothing fit. When she finally gave up, she realized she hadn't checked one place: the attic. She'd avoided it for years because Ryan stored old boxes up there. She climbed the narrow stairs, dust falling in small clouds. At the back of the room sat a trunk she didn't recognize. The key slid in easily. The lock clicked open with quiet finality. Inside the trunk were papers, photographs, and a small black notebook. She flipped through it, her breath quickening as she recognized Ryan's handwriting. The entries weren't work notes. They were journal pages documenting everything. Her name, the night of the swap, her meetings with Josh, even things she hadn't told him. He had written about fear, guilt, and the growing sense that someone was watching them. The last entry ended mid-sentence. If she reads this, I'm all ready. The rest of the page was blank. Her hands trembled as she closed the book. She sat there, surrounded by dust and memories, staring at the notebook. Ryan had known everything. Maybe he'd even known what was coming. She flipped back through earlier pages, scanning his words again. One line repeated several times. Don't trust Josh. Another note was scribbled on the inside cover. The jar isn't what it seems. Her chest tightened as she realized she had thrown it away that morning. She rushed downstairs to the kitchen, but the trash bin was empty. The jar was gone again, as if it had never existed. Panic crept in as she searched every corner of the house. Then she saw it. The jar sitting neatly on the table again, the glass now perfectly clean, filled with new beans. Her reflection stared back from its smooth surface. A faint scratch on the lid caught her eye. It wasn't words this time, just a symbol, a circle intersected by a single line. She didn't know what it meant. She reached for it, but before she could touch it, her phone buzzed. The message read, "Don't open it this time." Emma froze. The number was blocked. She turned off the phone and backed away from the table. Her mind raced through every possibility. Was Josh in the house again? Was Ryan alive and warning her? She locked every door and window, heart pounding. As night fell, the jar seemed to glow faintly under the kitchen light. She couldn't tell if it was a trick of her tired eyes or something else. She sat in the hallway, clutching the notebook, too afraid to move, too tired to fight the fear anymore. Morning came quietly. Emma hadn't slept. The jar still sat there, untouched. She decided to take it to the police. Maybe fingerprints, maybe something they could trace. But as she lifted it, she noticed something heavy inside. A folded piece of paper under the beans. Against her better judgment, she opened the lid. The smell of coffee hit her, strong and sour. She poured the contents onto the counter. The paper unfolded on its own, stained and torn. In Ryan's handwriting, one sentence stared back at her. "He's still alive." The room spun. She stared at the note, unsure if it was a threat or a plea. If Ryan wrote it, he must have known Josh would find it. Maybe this was his only way of warning her. She ran to the drawer, pulled out the key again, and studied it. There was an address etched faintly into the metal, 182 Lakeview. Her mind connected it instantly. It wasn't a random number. It was the old motel near the lake, the same one she'd stayed at weeks earlier. She grabbed her coat and left. The drive to the motel felt endless. When she arrived, the parking lot was nearly empty, except for a single black car she recognized. Josh's. Her chest tightened. She parked and stepped out, scanning the balconies. Room 182 was upstairs, curtains drawn. She walked up slowly, key in hand. When she reached the door, her fingers hesitated on the handle. Her heart told her to run, but her mind whispered she needed answers. She pushed the key into the lock and turned it. The click echoed like a countdown beginning. The door creaked open, the smell of coffee and mildew mixing in the air. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp on the nightstand. Emma stepped inside, heart pounding. The bed was unmade, papers scattered across the floor. A small TV hummed quietly with static. On the dresser sat the jar, the same one she thought she had left at home. Her legs nearly gave out. She moved closer, noticing fingerprints smudged across the glass. Next to it lay a folded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local man missing, suspected of murder." The photo was Ryan's. She picked up the clipping with trembling hands. The article described a man who disappeared after police linked him to his wife's best friend's death. The story twisted the truth, painting Ryan as a manipulator, a jealous husband who couldn't handle betrayal. Emma dropped it onto the floor. It felt like the walls were closing in. She turned toward the bathroom door when she noticed it was slightly ajar. Light flickered from inside. Her breath caught as she heard movement, faint footsteps against tile. Someone else was here. She took a slow step forward, whispering Ryan's name without realizing it. The door creaked wider, revealing a dark reflection in the cracked mirror. A figure stood behind her. Tall, familiar. She turned sharply, but no one was there. The light flickered once more before dying completely. She backed away, gripping the jar like a weapon. Then her phone vibrated in her pocket. The message glowed on the screen. "You shouldn't have come." Her stomach twisted. The sender's name was blocked. She dropped the phone, its screen cracking against the floor. The bathroom door slammed shut on its own. Emma rushed to open it, but it wouldn't budge. From the other side came a faint scraping sound like metal dragging across tile. She stumbled back, grabbing her keys. As she turned to leave, a voice came from the corner. Calm, low, unmistakable. He stepped out of the shadows looking thinner, his face pale and eyes wild. He smiled faintly like they were old friends meeting again. She froze as he raised something in his hand. Ryan's missing watch still ticking. Josh said Ryan had confessed everything, that he and Megan planned to disappear together, to leave them both behind. Emma shook her head, saying nothing. He stepped closer, holding out the watch like proof. "He lied to you," he said softly. She didn't move. Every word felt rehearsed, every smile forced. When she asked where Ryan was, Josh's face twitched. He said Ryan was gone, but not the way she thought. The way he said it made her skin crawl. She backed away toward the door, but he blocked her path. He began pacing, talking fast, like his mind was unraveling in front of her. He said the game wasn't a game anymore. It was a test, and only one of them passed. He said he had saved her from Ryan's lies, that now she was his. She tried to reason with him, saying they both needed help, but his eyes shifted from sadness to rage in seconds. He said Ryan had begged for mercy at the bridge, that he had let the water take him. Emma's legs trembled. Her silence made him smile wider. Josh stepped closer, whispering that everything had worked out perfectly. Megan was gone. Ryan was gone. And now they could start over. Emma's pulse thundered in her ears, but she forced herself to stay calm. She glanced toward the dresser, where a metal lamp sat within reach. When Josh turned to grab the jar, she lunged, swinging the lamp. It hit him across the shoulder. He stumbled back, shouting, but she didn't wait. She ran for the door, wrenching it open and sprinting down the hallway. Her breath came in ragged bursts as she fled. She reached her car, fumbling with the keys. Behind her, footsteps echoed down the motel steps. She started the engine and sped away, tires screeching against the wet road. Her heart pounded as she checked the rearview mirror. No one followed. She kept driving until the lights of the town came into view. Pulling into a gas station, she sat trembling, gripping the wheel. The weight of everything hit her. Ryan's death, Josh's madness, Megan's disappearance. She had escaped, but the truth had followed her, sticking to her like a shadow. Emma called the police again, this time demanding they search the motel. She told them about Josh, the watch, the confession. The dispatcher sounded skeptical but said they'd send someone. She waited there, too scared to go home. Her hands shook as she scrolled through her phone, finding photos she hadn't seen before. Pictures of her house, her bed, her car. Each one taken from different angles. They were all sent from Josh's number, time-stamped over weeks. Her stomach churned. He had been everywhere. Every part of her life had already been mapped. Within an hour, the police arrived at the motel. They called her later that night. The room was empty. No signs of Josh. No fingerprints. No jar. Only the newspaper clipping remained. Emma felt her world tilt again. Either he had cleaned everything perfectly, or the police weren't telling her the full story. She spent the night in her car, parked outside the station, unable to close her eyes. Every noise made her flinch. She realized she was running out of places to feel safe. Even the truth didn't feel like a refuge anymore. Morning came gray and silent. Emma went home, showered, and tried to make herself believe it was over. But when she entered the kitchen, her phone buzzed again. A new photo appeared, the same one of her at the motel, but now with Ryan's face blurred out beside her. The caption read, "You belong to me now." She threw the phone onto the counter, shaking. This wasn't just obsession anymore. It was control, complete and quiet. She realized Josh wasn't done. He was reminding her that the game would never end. She went to the police again, begging them to trace the messages. They promised to look into it, but their eyes said they didn't believe her. When she left, she saw one of the officers whispering to another. They thought she was unstable. Maybe they were right. She felt like her life was splitting in two. One version where she was sane, another where everything was spiraling. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, whispering Ryan's name over and over, like saying it might bring him back from wherever he was. That night, unable to stay home, she drove back to the lake once more. It was quiet now. The water still, the wind cold. She parked by the old dock, headlights reflecting off the surface. She stepped out, clutching the notebook she had found in the attic. She read Ryan's final entry again under the weak beam of her flashlight. The unfinished sentence haunted her. She whispered the words, waiting for something, an answer, a sign, anything. But only the sound of the water replied, soft and steady, like breathing in the dark. Then she heard it. A faint noise near the trees. Not footsteps this time, but something different. A quiet clicking sound. She turned, shining her light. It landed on a camera, half buried in dirt, its lens cracked. She picked it up carefully. The memory card was still inside. She pocketed it and drove straight home. Her hands shook as she plugged it into her laptop. There were dozens of files. Photos, short videos, all labeled by date. The earliest ones were of their group dinners. The newest were of her, alone. One video stood out. It was recorded 2 nights ago. The footage showed her sleeping in her bed, peaceful, unaware. Then after a few seconds the frame shifted slightly as if someone adjusted the camera. A hand entered the shot. Pale, thin, unmistakably male. It brushed her hair gently, then retreated. She slammed the laptop shut, her stomach churning. She ran to check the locks. Every door, every window, everything was closed. The realization made it worse. Whoever had filmed that had already been inside while she slept. The next morning, she drove to the station again with the laptop. The officers took it, promising to analyze the footage. Hours later, one of them called her back. They said the timestamps didn't match the night she remembered. According to the data, some videos were recorded before Ryan disappeared. Long before. That didn't make sense. She hung up, sitting motionless in her car. Either the files were altered, or Ryan had known about the surveillance all along. The truth twisted tighter around her, impossible to separate from the lies. That night, unable to stay still, she began cleaning out the house. She tore open drawers, emptied closets, threw away everything connected to the past. It wasn't about order, it was about control. Each item she trashed made her feel lighter. When she reached Ryan's old office, she stopped. On the desk was an envelope she hadn't seen before, tucked beneath a stack of papers. Inside was a key identical to the one she'd used at the motel, but this one had no number, only a small engraving of a circle with a line through it. The symbol matched the one scratched on the jar lid. She stared at it, feeling her skin crawl. This couldn't be coincidence. She took the key and sat on the floor, staring at the empty space around her. Every object in the house now felt like part of a puzzle she didn't understand. She considered destroying the key but couldn't. Something inside her whispered that it wasn't over yet, that the story had one final layer waiting to be uncovered. The quiet felt like pressure, heavy and endless. At midnight she dreamed again. In the dream she was standing by the lake, the sound of the bell echoing across the water. Ryan stood on the dock, waving for her to come closer. When she reached him, he pointed toward the water, whispering that the truth was underneath. She looked down and saw her own reflection change, her face blurring, becoming Megan's. She jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The sound of rain outside matched the rhythm from her dream. She didn't know where the dream ended, and memory began anymore. Unable to ignore it, she decided to return to the bridge at dawn. She needed to see for herself, to end whatever this was. The fog was thick, the road empty. When she reached the bridge, she parked and stepped out. The air smelled of wet metal and lake water. She walked to the railing, staring down into the murky depths. Something caught her eye, a glimmer beneath the surface, faint but real. She leaned closer, realizing it wasn't the watch this time. It was a car door. Ryan's car, half submerged. Her breath stilled. The police had said they found the car days ago, but this one was different. The plate didn't match. She ran back to her vehicle, calling the station again. The dispatcher promised to send someone. While she waited, she turned on the headlights toward the water, trying to see better. A pale hand broke the surface for a second, then vanished. She stumbled backward, slipping on the wet pavement. By the time officers arrived, the lake was still again, like nothing had happened at all. The police searched for hours but found no sign of a body, no car, nothing. They told her stress was distorting her memory. That exhaustion could make the mind play tricks. She didn't argue. She just went home, numb. When she entered, she froze. On the dining table sat the same camera she had given to the police earlier, cleaned and gleaming. A note was taped beside it. 4 words written in Ryan's handwriting. Don't believe the evidence. Her knees weakened. Every piece of proof now felt like a lie planted to break her sanity. That night she sat on the floor, staring at the camera. She didn't touch it. Her reflection stared back from the lens, distorted. For the first time, she wondered if this had all been designed, if the game had never ended, only evolved. She remembered something Ryan once said during their last fight. We all see what we want to see. Maybe that was the point of all this. Maybe everyone, Ryan, Josh, even her, had become trapped in their own versions of the same lie. As dawn crept through the curtains, Emma realized there was only one place left to go. The cabin. Everything had started there, and maybe that's where it needed to end. She packed a bag with a notebook, the key and the jar, which she took from the table again despite her fear. The drive felt unreal, like moving through a memory. When she reached the lake road, the mist hung low, the air heavy with silence. She parked, stepped out, and walked toward the cabin one last time. The door was already open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and damp wood. The furniture was overturned, the walls scratched with markings she didn't recognize. On the table sat 2 mugs, one clean, one stained dark. She placed the jar down and took out the key. In the corner of the room was a small locked chest. She hadn't noticed before. The key slid in easily. The lock clicked. She hesitated, staring at the lid. Somewhere outside, the bell rang again, long and low, as she slowly lifted it open. Inside the chest, Emma found photographs, neatly stacked and organized by date. Each one captured a moment she remembered. Dinners, drives, the night at the cabin, but the angles were wrong. She wasn't looking at the camera in any of them. Someone else had been watching from nearby. Beneath the photos lay a small flash drive. She plugged it into her phone, and a video began to play. The image was shaky but clear enough. It showed Ryan and Josh arguing near the bridge. The camera panned once, revealing Megan holding it. Emma watched in disbelief as the argument escalated. Megan shouted something she couldn't hear. And then Ryan shoved Josh. Josh swung back, and Megan screamed. The camera fell, showing only the dark water. The footage cut out. Emma's stomach turned. Megan had filmed everything. That meant she'd been part of this. Maybe the one pulling the strings all along. She replayed the clip, noticing a faint reflection in the car window nearby, herself standing by the tree line. She didn't remember being there. The realization hit her like cold air. Her mind raced. If she was there that night, why didn't she remember? She searched the chest again and found a second notebook, smaller and worn. It was Megan's. The first page began with a chilling sentence. "They'll never know it was my idea." Each entry detailed the plan, the swap, the manipulation, the jealousy she wanted to create between Ryan and Josh. The final pages stopped abruptly, ink smudged. The last words read, "He knows, Ryan knows." Emma felt sick. Everything, every fight, every message had been orchestrated. The walls of the cabin seemed to close in. She realized now that none of them had been innocent. They had all been caught in a web, spun by someone who wanted control and chaos. Megan had started the fire, but obsession had kept it burning. Emma packed both notebooks and turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her. Her breath quickened as footsteps creaked on the porch outside. Through the crack in the door she saw a shadow pass, tall, steady, familiar. A voice followed, low and calm. Josh had come back. He stepped inside slowly, eyes glinting in the dim light. He looked exhausted, almost broken. He told her he had seen the video too, that Megan had manipulated him, used his feelings to test how far he'd go. He said Ryan's death wasn't planned, but it wasn't an accident either. Emma didn't believe him. Every word out of his mouth felt like poison. She asked where Megan was. He smiled faintly and said she was still here, gesturing to the ground. Emma's stomach twisted as she realized what he meant. Buried beneath the cabin. The words hit her harder than she expected. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Josh said he didn't want to hurt her, that they could start over, that they were both survivors now. Emma's mind screamed for her to run, but her body wouldn't move. He stepped closer, reaching for her hand. She backed away, bumping into the table where the jar still sat. His eyes flicked toward it. He whispered, "You kept it." She realized then, the jar wasn't a symbol, it was his way of marking what belonged to him. He lunged suddenly, grabbing her arm. She fought back, the jar crashing to the floor and shattering. Coffee beans scattered across the wood, rolling underfoot. She kicked him hard, breaking free, and bolted toward the door. He grabbed her ankle, pulling her down. She swung the flashlight, connecting with his head. He fell back with a groan. She stumbled to her feet and ran outside into the cold night. The rain had started again, soaking her hair, blurring her vision. Behind her, Josh called out her name, calm, as if nothing had happened. She sprinted toward the dock, her shoes slipping on the wet boards. The lake stretched wide and dark before her. She turned to see Josh limping toward her, one hand clutching his head. His voice carried over the rain, saying they were meant to end it together. She shouted that it was over, that she'd expose everything, but he only laughed, a tired, hollow sound. He stepped closer, saying she'd never prove who did what. The police believed she was unstable. Without evidence, it was just her word against his. Emma realized he was right. The truth had twisted so far that no one could separate it anymore. She reached into her pocket, pulling out Megan's notebook. She waved it at him. "This is the proof," she said. His expression shifted. For the first time, fear flashed in his eyes. He lunged again, trying to grab it, but she turned and threw the notebook into the lake. He froze, watching it sink beneath the surface. She told him that no one would ever know, and that was the only justice left. Josh stood there, breathing hard, rain pouring down his face. Then, without warning, he stepped forward. She backed away until her heels hit the edge of the dock. He whispered something she couldn't hear, then lunged. They both went over the side. The water was freezing, swallowing them instantly. She kicked, gasping, fighting to reach the surface. His grip tightened on her wrist. She struck him with the flashlight again and again until he let go. She broke the surface, gasping for air, clawing her way toward the dock's edge. She dragged herself onto the boards, coughing, shaking, her fingers numb. Behind her the water rippled, but Josh didn't resurface. She waited, staring into the darkness, expecting to see his head break through, but the lake stayed still. The only sound was the wind. Her entire body trembled as she looked at the black water. She whispered a silent prayer that it was finally over. Then from somewhere deep below, a faint metallic clang echoed, like a bell ringing one last time. She turned and walked away, leaving the lake behind. By morning, police found Emma walking barefoot down the road near the bridge, soaked and shivering. They took her to the hospital, where she told them everything. The cabin, the fight, the notebooks, the truth. Divers searched the lake for days but found nothing. No body, no car, no sign of Josh or Megan. The case went cold again, folded into files marked unresolved. Emma moved away a month later to a small apartment in the city where no one knew her name. She started therapy, trying to rebuild a version of herself she could live with. Her new life was quiet. She worked part-time, kept to herself, and avoided the news. People around her saw a woman who seemed peaceful, maybe even normal. They didn't see the scars she carried inside. Every night she double-checked the locks, unplugged her phone, and left a light on in the hallway. The sound of running water still made her uneasy. Sometimes she caught herself glancing at reflections, expecting to see someone behind her. Old habits of fear had become part of her routine, stitched into her survival. One rainy afternoon, she walked past a small antique shop downtown. In the window she saw it. A glass jar identical to the one that had haunted her for months. Her breath caught. She stepped inside, asking the clerk where it came from. He shrugged, saying a man had dropped off a box of old items last week. When she asked for a name, he couldn't remember. She bought the jar anyway, taking it home like a ghost she couldn't let go of. That night, she set it on the kitchen counter and stared. She told herself it was just glass, nothing more. But when she looked closer, she saw something etched faintly on the lid, a circle with a single line through it. Her heart sank. She sat down slowly, hands trembling. Maybe it wasn't the same jar, but it didn't matter anymore. It was what it represented, the reminder that some stories don't end cleanly. Some memories don't die. She left it there overnight, unable to throw it away. The next morning the jar was empty, but the smell of coffee filled the air. Days passed. Emma started noticing small things again. Her door unlocked when she was certain she'd locked it. Her mail rearranged. Her reflection catching movement that wasn't hers. She told herself it was her mind playing tricks. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard the soft tap of glass from the kitchen. She got up slowly, heart steady, and walked toward the sound. The jar was on the floor, lid open. Inside was a folded postcard. She picked it up carefully. On it was written, "You still owe me silence." She sank to the floor, the card trembling in her hands. It wasn't fear she felt now. It was exhaustion. The realization that the game had never ended. Maybe it never could. She burned the card in the sink, watching the flames curl around the words until nothing remained. The smoke rose softly, smelling faintly of coffee. When the fire went out, she felt strangely calm, like something had finally shifted. She poured water over the ashes and whispered goodbye, though she wasn't sure who she was saying it to anymore. Weeks later, Emma packed her belongings and moved again, this time without telling anyone where she was going. A new town, new number, new name. She told herself this would be the final start. She rented a small apartment above a bookstore where the smell of paper and ink replaced coffee. She volunteered at the shop, keeping her days full and her thoughts quiet. On her first morning there, she opened the window and let the sunlight in. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like running. But peace, she learned, was a fragile thing. One evening, as she closed the store, she noticed a man outside standing across the street. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his stance felt familiar. He didn't move, didn't speak. She turned away, locking the door, pretending not to see. When she looked again, he was gone. Back in her apartment, she tried to convince herself it was coincidence. Still, before bed, she tied a small red thread around her wrist, not as a mark of fear, but as a reminder of control. Every morning, she checked that thread before starting her day. It became her ritual, her way of staying grounded. The town began to feel like home. People greeted her kindly, unaware of the story she carried inside. She smiled more often, even laughed sometimes. But every so often, she'd wake at night and hear a faint bell sound in the distance, the same tone that once echoed across the lake. She never went to the window to look. Some ghosts, she decided, were better left unacknowledged. Months passed without incident. Emma began to believe she might actually be free. The nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of normalcy. Grocery lists, conversations, sunlight. Then one day, while cleaning the apartment, she opened a drawer she rarely used. Inside was another postcard, identical to the ones from before. Her stomach tightened. She flipped it over. It was blank, except for a single coffee bean taped to the center. No words, no message, just silence. She placed it back in the drawer and closed it, deciding not to read into it anymore. That night, she sat by the window, watching the rain fall over the quiet street below. She realized she wasn't the same woman who once sought safety in lies or love in chaos. The pain had shaped her, sharpened her, but it hadn't destroyed her. She whispered to herself that she had survived, not because she was strong, but because she'd learned how to keep going even when the truth refused to settle. The world outside was calm, unaware of her story. That anonymity felt like the truest form of peace she could have. Before bed, she poured herself a cup of tea and turned off the lights. In the dim reflection of the window, she saw her own face. Older, quieter, but free. For a brief moment, another shape flickered beside her in the glass, tall and motionless. She blinked, and it was gone. She didn't flinch or panic this time. She just smiled faintly and whispered, "Not tonight." She walked away, leaving the window open, the sound of rain soothing her to sleep. For the first time, she didn't dream of the lake. Morning sunlight filled the room. The red thread still circled her wrist, frayed but unbroken. She made breakfast, humming softly, feeling almost normal. As she cleaned the counter, she noticed the jar sitting by the window again, faintly fogged from condensation. She approached slowly, half expecting a note. Instead, there was only water inside, calm, still, reflecting the sky. She smiled, touching the glass lightly. Maybe it was a gift, or maybe a reminder. Either way, she didn't feel fear, just acceptance. The story had run its course, even if the echoes remained. That night, as she prepared for bed, she tied a new red thread around her wrist and placed the old one in the jar. She whispered a quiet promise, to live, not to look back. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, distant and soft. She closed her eyes, feeling the world settle around her. Somewhere, far away, a bell rang once more. But this time it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like closure. Emma smiled in the dark, knowing that some endings aren't about escape, they're about finally stopping the game.